Hey, welcome everybody to the Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse podcast.
Where we bring you hope and inspiration for growth and healing. We are truly here to change the dialogue and stigma around what it means to feel good or be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing.
You know, we often talk about things that people don't want to talk about. However, they're important subjects that need to be discussed to decrease the stigma.
Absolutely, for healing. So 2021 is the year of the nurse, and I'm going to add the year of the health professional because, all health professionals in the space, including doctors, nurses, wellness professionals, are going through so much taking care of patients during these times. So we're highlighting and illuminating doctors, nurses, health professionals as we are in these true revolutionary times where we're changing how we approach and take care of patients.
Oh, we certainly are. And you know what? We don't all wake up one day and decide to enter the cannabis industry. I mean, there's usually a compelling story that goes along with those who take the plunge. What makes someone enter into the cannabis space as a practitioner? Sherri, will you introduce our guest?
Oh, I would be more than happy to. So we are really excited to introduce Dr. Karen Korn, who has been a teacher, researcher, and educational leader for over 2 decades. In 2018, she created Leaf Medic in Michigan, Ohio's first licensed online vocational school to provide certification for cannabis dispensary employees. Karen is also part of Greenleaf Education, a free online patient education platform set to launch in Michigan this year. So she's bringing cannabis education to our communities. Leaf Medic is the first approved vocational proprietary school to provide provisioning center training by the state of Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. So Leaf Medic is licensed to provide introductory training for cannabis industry employees in the state of Michigan. So important. So welcome, Karen. We are so happy to be here today. And, like Mark said, we don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be in the cannabis space. There's usually a story that goes around with that. And so we're excited to hear yours. So when did your journey with cannabis begin?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sherri and Mark. I appreciate your inviting me to come here and talk about my journey. I have a background in anthropology. I was an anthropology professor for many years. And I also was born with my foot attached incorrectly. It was called a club foot, but it's not I'm not missing toes. So I can't remember the correct word to describe what it is, but I had to have like a bar between my legs for the first 6 months of my life and some therapy to deal with that. And I went on to walk fine. Nobody ever really did anything more with that. But later in my life, when I reached my 40s, I started to experience sort of mysterious pain that didn't make sense all over my body. And, I went, as many patients do, down a lot of sort of rabbit holes with different, specialists to try and identify what was wrong with me. And ultimately, nearing 50, I had a physical therapist who helped me realize that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so I went through the process of genetic testing and all kinds of, you can be genetically tested, but there's also like a diagnostic screening that's done. So my youngest son and I went through that process, and we were both diagnosed with hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So it's the kind that's doesn't like show up on a genetic test. It's more of the diagnostic one. But with that, okay, go ahead.
For our new viewers, because a lot of people don't know what that is, would you just explain what that is?
Sure. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, there are like 13 different versions of this. It's a collagen disorder. And basically, I was born with defective collagen. And I've been able to trace it back. Actually, behind me, there's a chair that my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, sat in when he wore a back brace. And there's like some marks on this chair that have been there for generations. And when we started doing all this genetic testing, I realized he had that too, but nobody knew what it was back then. It's been relatively recent. In the 20th century, early part was when they first started to kind of identify that the collagen could be defective. And so anyway, I had a diagnosis of that and also fibromyalgia because it's a sort of it's associated, two syndromes that are associated. And I started taking some medication to try and manage that and going to physical therapy. But the medication had all kinds of side effects and basically made me feel stoned.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a teacher, and at the time I was a provost at a college, so I had a lot of people reporting to me, and I could not, go off into space periodically. And so in Ohio in 2016, they legalized medical cannabis, and that's where I live. I live in Ohio. And so I was very eager to participate in that program. But Michigan, which is just a little bit north, has had a medical program for a while. And so when I got my card in Ohio, I was finally able to get it. I could go to Michigan at first because they did not have anything available in Ohio, and I could use cannabis. But I, at my workplace, I was accused of smelling like cannabis one day. And so I lost my job. I was never drug tested. I didn't have it on me. It was a very, how should I say this? Very unhappy moment for me.
Yeah.
I was devastated because I really loved my job. But ultimately, I found that cannabis and CBD products, and I think at the time I was using a lot of CBD. And I was using it in full spectrum form, and I was smoking some flower. And so if I smelled like anything at the time, it was probably CBD because the terpenes are present in both types of product. Yep. But anyway, I didn't fight it. I just was like, okay, this is sort of the door is opening to something new. I had been there for 5 years, and I said, all right, I'm ready. I'll try something different. But since the program was launching in Ohio at the time, my close friends and I, one of them has a degree in law, and the other is a whiz on the graphic design and web design. We said, well, why don't I take everything I've learned working in higher education for the past 20 years and, try and start something here in Ohio that would help to train people to work in the cannabis industry. Because as a patient, whenever I have gone to dispensaries, it's, few and far between that I had some really outstanding, knowledgeable staff helping me. And I realized very early on that those were the people who were going to, for the most part, help patients choose what they use. So I was like, as a patient and as an educational professional, I want to do something to make this great in Ohio. So Ohio's program was pretty slow. And I met Kathleen Graham, who's a registered nurse in Michigan. And she and I collaborated on developing a curriculum for Michigan. So really what I did as an educator is I took all of the research I could find and consulted with as many medical professionals who were informed about cannabis that I could find to design this curriculum. And so we put it together. We got it approved in Ohio and also Michigan, and set out to try and see if we could make an impact on the cannabis industry by providing scientific, evidence-based education and training for people who are working face-to-face with patients and consumers of cannabis. Yeah. And so that's my sort of abridged version of my journey and how I got here.
Wow. It's so crazy that you bring up Ehlers-Danlos, because I have really one of my best friends in the world. Her daughter has that condition as well.
Okay.
And you know what? One of our friends, Dr. Jordan Tischler of Inhale Doc MD.
Yeah, Inhale MD.
Yeah, Inhale MD, who does medical cannabis certifications here, Harvard trained doc. He just co-authored a book called Disjointed.
Oh,
Navigating the Diagnosis and Management of Hypermobile, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Small world.
Yeah.
Cannabis doc, and he's in the
I love Dr. Tischler.
Effective. Yeah, he's
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and there's been a couple of patients that we've taken care of, and they've had really good results using cannabis, for multiple other things that are associated with the syndrome,
I was going to say Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is very complicated because it's collagen is a part of so many systems in your body. And so to be honest with you, because it runs through your whole body, when somebody explained to me, years ago what the endocannabinoid system was, I was like, I feel like these things could somehow be connected because they're both, systemic and sort of contribute to the regulation of all of the different systems. And so I fundamentally believe deep down inside that we will find out someday that some of the syndromes that we identify, especially pain ones that are, myalgic throughout the body, you know, that have like many places that they show up,
Yes.
are intimately tied to the endocannabinoid system.
I agree. You know what
I'm
I say?
convinced.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
You know what I say, Dr. Cohn? I say that, and this is my opinion, but I think that the discovery of the endocannabinoid system is going to be like, it's going to be a Nobel Prize winning discovery. Like it's absolutely going to go down in the books as one of the pivotal moments in healthcare.
I
where
agree.
we finally, you know, uncovered this majestic system inside of our bodies that regulates so many different areas.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when we teach and educate on it, it's, you know, and like you mentioned, there's so many different types of the syndrome and the different conditions that can manifest and the symptoms, is we educate on the endocannabinoid system. If you can see my little handy dandy umbrella right there, because it's such an abstract concept. A lot of patients are like, I don't get it. What is it? It's kind of weird. You got receptors here, you got receptors where, what's a neurotransmitter? So I was like, okay, let's take this to a level that I can even understand and explain to my kids. So I thought of an umbrella, and the umbrella shows the interconnectedness of all of our body. Because if you imagine we are that umbrella, all the spokes of the umbrella are our different organ systems and our immune system. And all the fabric pieces of the umbrella that connect to the spokes of the umbrella are our neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell the spokes of the umbrella to either do something or stop doing something. The very tippy top of the umbrella, we have the endocannabinoid system that blankets on top of the entire umbrella, because we have cannabinoid receptors on all organ systems and at the neurotransmitter signaling junction site. So it's just really cool how we produce internal endogenous cannabinoids to shower on our umbrella, right? The on-off switch. Do something, stop doing something, stop, do all day long, right? And the goal is to keep the umbrella going up and down nicely. Right. So I love that we're able to take that information and bring it to people so they can truly grasp, because it's not just about one thing. It shows the interconnectedness, how our bodies are completely interconnected, and cannabinoids can be the connecting factor to make our systems. I look at it as the oil, you know, the oil in our machine, you know, to keep us going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's absolutely.
That's a great analogy. It makes me think of the Tin Man. And that's really how you feel, you know? If you have pain and you're you know, struggling, like when you get up in the morning and you haven't had any cannabinoids for 7 or 8 hours, and you know, the first ones that you put into your body, it's like, I personally feel like the Tin Man. I'm 50 now, so I wake up and I'm like, tea instead of coffee, tea, and my my cannabis, so that I can like move again.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way. I'm the oldest one on this podcast right now. I'll tell you, like I use this a lot. I make an involuntary noise now when I get out of the automobile. I don't know where it came from, but I like grunt a little when I move out of the car. Like, it's a little embarrassing, like, because I notice it, and it's because there's a little bit more pain, a little more effort.
I call it crunch.
Oh my gosh.
I got the crunchies. This is what I call it. The crunchies and all those tight corded knots that are all through your neck and upper back.
So Dr. Korn, I'd love to ask this question. What's the biggest misconception that people have about your involvement with cannabis? I mean, you've been in it for a while now and you're really out there. So maybe it's not, you know, so much of an issue before, but I know for Sherri and for me, there were people in our lives that were just like, oh my gosh, you're a stoner. Like my mother was so anti-cannabis. God bless her. She was my biggest supporter. But when I got into this space, she was not a happy person.
Yeah.
She felt like she failed.
Yeah. I guess really quickly for the new viewers, if you haven't heard my story, my mom was so appalled. Oh, I paid for Boston College and you're a drug dealer. Right. And, yeah. Oh yeah. She wrote me out of her will and blocked me on Facebook for a year. I had to tell you though, I let it happen because it was like, you know what? It's okay. I'm feeling better. I don't want to kill myself anymore. I want to live. I want to figure this out. And so slowly but surely it was through education and me demonstrating how I could make this plant work for me. We started our podcast. We had a nun on. And then it was the nun. It was the story of the nun that used cannabis to bridge the gap from what she wasn't getting from traditional medicine. My mom came
It's
Yeah.
the respect that
Then that helps. That's great.
It's just the education. You just keep educating and, and let people be in their process. Everyone's in a different process. And all we got to keep doing, is planting seeds, demonstrating and showing that this plant is effective and it can be used safely.
Did you
So 3
experience
cheers.
With my family, it's interesting. They watched me suffer for a while. So when I started going to them and saying that it was helping my pain, my mother is an avid organic gardener, and my parents are relatively conservative, but they're both pretty well educated. And I think as a gardener, my mother really knows, the power of plants. She understands how magical they are, how much nutrition they bring to people when they eat them, and then also, herbal medicine, the different ways that people have been able to get themselves off of pharmaceutical medications. And really my syndrome comes through her. She didn't know that she had this, but she has it too. Right. And so I basically said, look, it works for me. You just try this one. It was CBD at the time, this one start with, because you're not going to feel high, and she found help from it as well. My father still, he supported me in starting my business and gave me a little help financially. So I think he believes in me. I though have tried to get him, he's 83. So I've been like, why don't you try some of this? He's like, no, I'm fine. My doctor says my beer is fine. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure your doctor says your beer is fine.
I know.
He has Dr. Budweiser as his doctor.
But a lot of people use Dr. Budweiser. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Bud.
But yeah. So, but I think I would say that probably the most negative experience I've had with it has involved things like losing my job, and also I have 3 children, and my 2 older children have suffered from severe mental illnesses much of their lives, and so we have had a very long journey with involvement with a lot of different institutions and medical systems in different states. And when I started using cannabis and I had a child in Utah, we had some trouble because I was in Colorado on my way to Utah. And so I had cannabis, with me, and we had some difficulty. And I have found that all of the legal problems I've had involving this, I've always come out okay. It's never been anything, terrible, but it really showed me what it must feel like for anybody who gets in that situation. And people for so many decades in the past who were probably using cannabis for the same reasons I'm using it, and they're in jail. There's a lot in this industry that I think we need to sort of go back and make some amends and address some of these inequities. But it really opened my heart because I've always been a success, right? Like I have a PhD. I, had a nice house. I've had I did the things right and I landed okay. And I still had horrible experiences with employers or the law regarding this plant that works to help me feel like a whole person again. So I feel a lot of empathy and compassion for people for whom their path has been, how should I say this, fraught with some, legal or institutional challenges, because it was difficult for us for a while there.
It still happens today.
It does.
It's still happening today, which is just that's criminal. That's the criminality of it for sure.
So with that being said, have you noticed a shift in the traditional medical community to be more accepting of cannabis as medicine?
So in Michigan and a lot of states that I've spent time in where there has been an established program for a while, I absolutely have found that to be the case. I think in states like Ohio, if you talk to a clinician independently, and first of all, if they're a certified to recommend doctor, obviously they got behind, cannabis. But in Ohio, it's interesting. Hospital systems won't allow certain clinicians, certain hospital systems will not permit their clinicians to engage with cannabis as a medicine with their patients. So if you tell a doctor who's in that system that you use cannabis individually, they tend to be supportive, but institutionally they cannot. And I find that to be one of the biggest challenges when I engage with medical professionals, is that I think one-on-one as individuals, as doctors, they realize that the endocannabinoid system is a thing, and we should deal with it and address it when we're trying to bring, full healing to our patients. But, I think that then they're a part of a hospital system, or they're a part of a particular, medical practice that doesn't permit them to. So I think if the legal status changed or the scheduling changed, I'm not going to say which way and what exactly that needs to happen, because Kathleen and I just had a conversation this morning about if it gets descheduled completely versus if they move it to Schedule 2, what the consequences could be. But
Right.
I feel like if at the federal level something changed and it was no longer looked at as, the devil's lettuce, we could potentially get more medical, I should say, systems, hospital systems, medical practice systems, to
Right.
be a little bit less, how should I say, I don't know, scared. Because I really think what it is that they're afraid that there would be some, financial or legal consequence, which
It's always what's
clear
right.
that up. I feel like there's a lot of clinicians out there who would love to say, okay, let's add this to the mix. Let's start seeing if we can see patients not on, opioids and,
Right.
a lot of these patients that have really hardcore side effects or can be addictive.
Yeah. And so the other point too, when it comes to clinicians as well, is even if they don't have knowledge about cannabis as medicine, they really should have knowledge of the endocannabinoid system, because everything that doctors tell their patients to do or don't do affects that system. So if they had knowledge of the clinical endocannabinoid system, they could look at all of these different things that patients are doing or not doing and give them guidance just in that little bit, just in that regard. Same thing with pharmaceuticals, looking at pharmaceuticals. Doctors should know this, that 5 or more pharmaceuticals, there's a 50% chance that your drugs are interacting. 10 or more pharmaceuticals, there is a 100% chance that your pharmaceuticals are interacting with not one another.
Absolutely.
And probably not in a good way.
Right.
And the other thing that I never learned either until I was sick, suffering, and dying was that pharmaceuticals have a drug nutrient depletion. Not all of them, but a large majority of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and we know that nutrition is key for, monitoring the, for upregulating and nourishing the endocannabinoid system. So, really this education that you're providing, I think is going to be great, because I truly see, all of these people that you're educating in the communities for the dispensaries, they're going to know more than the medical professionals.
Well, and that's why I joined forces with Kathleen Graham, because she, does education for nurses, and trying to work on collaborating with other clinicians who have an interest in bringing education to medical professionals. But so in the dispensary space, though, I will say that I would love to see there be like nurses that could. Cannabis nurses, ones who are trained and very well informed on cannabis, especially, that could interact with patients and engage with them inside of dispensaries. I think that would be an awesome thing, even if it wasn't every day. Like there was a certain day that the nurse would be there, because I think that it's great for us to educate, for nurses and doctors who have co-authored my curricula, to educate patients. To bud tenders, because I think that the bud tenders will do a good job for the most part when they're very informed in helping patients, but they're not even trained like pharmaceutical techs are. Like, think of, if you go to a CVS, how much training the person that works behind the counter dispensing that. I don't mean the pharmacists themselves, but all those other folks, they've gone to school at a community college, at least for an associate's degree, right? Or a certification. And so, that's not around so far in any state that I know of. Washington State does have mandatory training for anybody who works in a dispensary, and that's what we've kind of modeled our programs after. But so my point is just, it's a weird field, and I was trying to think of where else there are sort of, I hate to say this, but pseudo-medical professionals giving advice, maybe at like a health food store, somebody who works there who isn't a doctor or a nurse who's giving people advice on what supplements to take, because really, vitamins can have the same kind of
Sure can.
but also deleterious effect on the human body. So maybe I would put them in line with like the employee at the health food store that doesn't have a degree in nutrition. But I don't know if I'm making sense in the way I'm saying this.
No, you are. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's a very strange. It's just a very strange industry to be in this
Yeah, because
medical
it's
cannabis space and cannabis in general. You know, coming from a strict business background and having owned a business for 30 years, you
Mhm.
know, this space is just, it feels like still like sort of a Wild West, right? It
yeah, I was
still
just
feels
gonna say
like,
that.
oh my gosh. Okay, what state are we talking about now? Like Carl just shared a story about, you know, Indiana, where there's no medical cannabis, and
Right.
had a good friend and he has a good friend that has a daughter who hadn't spoke her first words in 15 years after his friend carefully added THC to the CBD
Wow.
regimen. And you know what? The government got involved and he had to stop the THC, and she's now nonverbal again. I mean, that to me again is
Wow. That's
criminal.
criminal. I
That's
can't believe that.
brutal. They're negatively impacting people's lives because of outdated regulations that were never based on science to begin with,
100%
ever.
No,
It's just
wow.
it fires me up. I get so
I
angry about it.
Me too.
Well,
It's because
because if someone were to say, you know, your child cannot have this food, whatever food it is, like this one
Right.
kind of part of their nutrition they cannot have.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, we're no meat for your kid. We'd
Mhm.
all be like, why would the government do that to somebody? Or, you know, I mean, I
Right.
guess you can supplement with other proteins, that meat's not the best choice, but you know, it is literally almost like a nutrient that they're saying, like, you can't give this nutrient to your kid.
Right.
And it's
I think we all agree, all three of us here agree, and we know intimately that cannabis is a safe and effective medicine.
Mhm.
yeah,
Just
it's a phyto. And then if you want to,
oh,
bring it to a nutritional level,
yeah,
I like to call it a phytobotanical nutrient. It's an
Nice.
adaptogen,
it
right? A
is. That's a good
phytobotanical. Yeah, it's a good one, especially
Mhm.
when you're eating. You think of all the compounds that are in it and how it interacts. It's like the biggest, giantest, best salad I've ever had in my life.
Absolutely.
Oh
Absolutely.
my God. Right.
yeah,
So Leaf Medic, speaking of salads,
Mhm.
Leaf,
yeah.
Leaf Medic.
What's Leaf Medic?
Yeah.
So Leaf Medic is the name of the school that I started in Ohio, and it
Mhm.
also we also have a school in Michigan, and our website is mmjtraining.com or michigan.mmjtraining.com, because we have two sites, one for each state. And basically, right now, what we have available for sale through our school are two certification programs, one in Ohio and one in Michigan, that are tailored specifically for provisioning center or dispensary employees.
Mhm.
We also have some online patient education, which is basically like the version of it's a different version of the same material that we offer to
Right.
bartenders, but
Yeah.
you know, specifically sort of tailored to patients. And then
Right.
also through Cannabis Nurse and Kathleen Graham, we offer some nursing CEUs in the state of Michigan.
Mhm.
And
Beautiful.
did mention it in the bio, you know, that you were reading from earlier about Greenleaf Education. We have not launched that yet, but my hope for that is that it is going to be a patient-facing platform where all of this same education will be available to patients, and we will try to collaborate with provisioning centers in Michigan to highlight products that we identify as being helpful for particular, you know, resolving particular conditions, and then sort of do I don't know
Mhm.
how to describe it, but kind of a mini sort of educational, promotional set of either you know, written materials or videos to help patients be able to sort of figure out what it is they want to go look for at the dispensary that's near to where they live to help them. Because in Michigan, there is an adult use, you know, it's legal for adult use. Um,
Mhm.
and my belief is, because this is where I came at it, when I went to Colorado, I didn't have a medical card. But I absolutely went into the dispensary on the adult use side because it was legal there. And I asked every question I could of the medical bud tender, and asked them to help me over on the rec side, because I knew that I was looking for specific kinds of relief, particular terpene profiles. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, I would like that one over there if she could come over and help me. So I guess my point is, I don't think I'm alone in as an adult use consumer when I went into a dispensary looking for products that were going to give me particular outcomes. You know, I would
Right.
be able to be sure that I wasn't consuming something that would make me tired when I wanted to be awake, or something that would make me awake when I needed to sleep. That's just the basic one. But so I think that really even adult use consumers are still using cannabis medically. I mean,
both Sherri and I agree with you wholeheartedly.
100%.
Using it recreationally or medicinally, it's all medicinally.
Sure.
Yep.
And it
has to do with your intention, intention when you go to consume. You know, how do you intend on using this? It's consciousness. You know, you're going to look at your plant and be like, I'm going to use this because whatever reason you're going to use it. Really, the plant teaches us consciousness and to take care of our bodies.
It does.
To learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that.
So quick question too. This is really good. So we've been talking about dispensaries and training and the industry, you know, medical cannabis industry, the adult use cannabis industry. So what do you think are the two most important things that need to be addressed in the cannabis industry today?
Well, I would say that there are two things that the industry itself on a whole needs to get right. And the first is equity. I think that, like, we brought this up earlier, but I think that there are a lot of people who've been kind of shut out that need to be let in and encouraged and supported in getting involved in the industry. I think that we have to do some kind of due diligence, and I can't say specifically in every circumstance what that is, for people who have been incarcerated for simply, you know, selling or possession of cannabis. Now, obviously, if they were dealing a bunch of other drugs, I'm not trying to throw everything into that. I'm not, a person who's out here trying to, I guess I kind of believe that most drug users are not trying to hurt anybody in general, but obviously there are things like, deaths associated with drug dealing. But I still think that we really need to do something about the whole population of people that are still incarcerated for the same plant that some of us are using for medical benefit.
Did you see that? There was I just happened to turn on the TV last night, and there was the Soul of a Nation. There was that special on last night. And they talked about Evanston, Illinois.
Okay.
Is about to pass a reparation bill.
That would be
reparation for the African American community, because Evanston, literally put them into this small little patch, and the values of the homes are a third of what the white neighborhoods are. And so they've come to this term. They're going to pay for it with cannabis tax revenue.
That's amazing.
So there's the tie. It can be done. They'll be the first community to do it. That's so exciting.
So cool. I want to go look that up. When we get off this,
I was so amazed to see the story. And I was so happy to see that finally positive movement toward reparation and being funded by cannabis taxes in a community that has been clearly and undeniably affected by the war on drugs, specifically because of the color of their skin. And that, to me, is to see that possibility open up. Oh,
yeah. So any place that I can find a way to be supportive in that capacity, I, as an anthropology professor, that actually is like one of the sort of, driving forces to get involved in this space, because I saw it as an opportunity for us to really try to rectify some things, make some changes that need to happen. So, that's definitely the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is safety. And I know I'm not trying to say that cannabis is scary, but we need lots of labeling and testing and information for patients, for consumers, and education, so that people know what they're putting in their body. Whenever anything's hidden for a long period of time, people do things that, later when it's out in the open, they're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have been doing that way.
Yes.
That had an impact on me. Right. People take a lot of pharmaceutical drugs. To your point, Sherri, if you're on 5 pharmaceuticals and you throw cannabis into it, cannabis doesn't ever kill anybody. There's never been a documented case of somebody dying from cannabis.
No.
If cannabis interacts with a really dangerous drug, who knows if it's going to eventually, cause there's a problem. I'm not saying cannabis hurts you. Again, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Right. Right. But there could be that interaction. And to your point, nobody has ever died from the drug-to-drug interaction with cannabis, but 90 or 100,000 people a year die from, a drug interaction, right?
Right.
So it's something to be aware of and to be educated on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just know what's in your products,
Yep. So this is really cool too. So, as nurses, what do? risk benefit ratio, legal risk reduction, right? We look at everything. Why are you using this? We go through all those questions. And then the other thing too is when we're teaching about products and education, you know, we look at a lot of different things, you know, lab testing for purity and potency.
Yeah.
We like organic practices. We like whole plant. We want to know if there's a residual solvents, contaminants,
Yep.
right? And so those things are really important too. The other thing that's really important that Mark and I have been talking about for a long time is when people are exposed to different products, they're going to look at it and they're like, what is this good for? Is this good for adult use? Is this good for medicinal use? Is it good for both? And how could I possibly use it? And so what we're doing is we're actually going to be creating a show to review these types of products. So we'll get a product donated. We're going to look at it, critically evaluate it, what's in it, how is it made, where did it come from, the ingredients, you know, the extraction method, what are the, you know, everything. And then just look at it and evaluate it in a way. What would this be? What would a medical patient use this for? That's the question we need to ask when we're looking at products, and then to help to make those decisions. And then looking at an adult use product, what would an adult use person looking at this product, why might they use that?
Right.
So it's looking at multiple different perspectives and really showing people about the plant, the products, because there's so many different ways. I was overwhelmed. It took me 2 years to figure out how to make this plant work for me. And I'm still learning. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Well, and I think that's what's so amazing about it. That's what's so fun about working in this industry. I was a provost at a graphic design college before I started Leaf Medic. And I loved working in the design space because, the whole idea of like an avatar and looking at something through the lens of a different viewer, and then sort of seeing how they see it or would interact with an app or a website. I learned about that through working at that school, and I thought that was so fascinating. But then when I came into the cannabis space, I was like, oh, we really kind of have avatars here too, and that, you know, edibles are edibles, right? On some level, you put cannabis in your mouth, it goes through, it's processed in your liver and digested and all of that. But like how an edible impacts an individual is so widely different, you know? I mean, disparity in terms of how people have impact from it. And so when you are selling somebody an edible, you need to remember to put on your different avatar glasses and look at it through their lens in terms of, you know, how much exposure have they had to cannabis before? How much experience do they have? What else have they eaten that day? Right. You know, what else are they going to eat? There's a lot of things that impact your experience. And I feel like cannabis is such a fascinating field of medicine because it is very unique to each individual. So that part of it is very exciting to me. And I think means that there's so much, I don't want to say magic, but there's still so much left to learn. And so many people see how it's
early on.
It is so early on.
I think one of the biggest failures is when somebody who's interested in trying cannabis as a medicine goes out and just does it on their own and has a negative experience, and forever and ever and ever, they're never going to try it again. And I think that what we're all doing here, educating is the key. So we just keep educating, more people use it in a safe and effective manner, and it'll work. That's
educate to medicate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to also have a buddy or a friend or someone else that you know. And that's why stigma busting, like you guys are doing here, is so important, because people need to be able to discuss with their family members, with their friends, what they're doing. I say that because first few times I experimented with THC, I did not have a great experience. I was very paranoid. I thought there were bugs crawling on me. I thought everybody knew I was stoned. I would walk by a police officer and be like, he is now talking about stone girl. My husband was like, you're not, they can't even tell. You look normal. But I need somebody there to help me like get through that. And I think if I did not have my husband, who was a more experienced user than I, like saying, you know what, that's going to be over. That's going to be over. And next time we'll do less and we'll try a different thing. So I think that it's so important to make it so that people can speak freely about it and not feel shame that they like, I got too high. That means I overdosed. I'm a bad person because I used too much medication. Do you know what I mean? Like, how people see it.
And that's what we talk about. We talk about, because we're researchers, right, Mark? We, as
Absolutely.
nurses, we are researchers. And so we talk about our trials and our successes and our needs improvement and to how to consume. And, because how can we truly educate a patient if we haven't been there and had that experience, right? And how to get out of it if it becomes
It's a
uncomfortable.
lot more difficult. It is. Yeah.
So here's a good question, and this goes right along with it. How can we improve the experience of patients and consumers, right?
So how can we improve that? Well, I think one of the very best things we could do in regulated legal states and in the industry, wherever there is a legal industry, is to do as much lab testing and reporting as possible and make it really easy for people to get access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because not everybody's going to look at it, but if you have someone that you're consulting with who could look at it, you can get a lot more information about the products that you're putting into your body when you have good lab reporting. So I'm a big fan of testing. I know that it's expensive, and I know it's not always accurate, and I know it's the bane of the legal industry's existence because it knocks a lot of products into like remediation or rejection because of contaminants. And what do you do with those? I mean, I realize that it's a problem though for every industry. If you think about it, cars, they're not like, you know what, let's just rub this car off, just fix this whole thing and send it back out, even though it failed the quality test. Like,
right.
So I don't know. I feel like, so how do we help patients with that? So if there's more information available and then more education for patients as well as bud tenders, as well as their clinicians, nurses, and doctors. Nurses are the ones with really serious patients who are right there at their bedside. Like if you're in the hospital, when I say really serious, I mean seriously ill people. And I feel like that's where nurses are so powerful because they can really help somebody, I don't know, make sense of what they're about to do with their cannabis. But, I think so nurses, I feel like in general, are the clinicians that are going to be one-on-one helping patients. But when a patient goes in, they need to make sure that the doctor doesn't like shame them for
It still happens every day.
We're not into it. So helping patients another way would be to enlighten and bring more understanding to other medical professionals and employers and people that would maybe discriminate against them for trying to use cannabis medicine to solve their problems. So
right. Yeah. So what products are you looking forward to seeing show up in the cannabis marketplace?
I have all kinds of fantasies about products, and then sometimes I'll see them show up in, some other state. I'll think, go there and see if I can get it. One of the things that's more recently, I'm starting to see it in a few dispensaries, and I think in some states it's pretty common, is like an inhaler. I think that's a very cool product. And I think that, I mean, I can use a vape pen for myself, but I feel like my mother feels really strange when she walks around with a vape pen. If she could have an inhaler, which she already has, I think that would be a way of making it just more medical for people. I know that sounds strange, but
just more socially accepted, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What about an old-fashioned way? You know how people used to boil pots of water and you put your head over, right? So can you think if you have a contraption like the aromatherapy? You put
that would be amazing.
You put your face and just imagine you get the distillation, the cannabinoids in your skin. You can inhale it. There you go. There's a thought for someone out there in patent land that wants to create something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because it would also help your skin.
Yeah, just thinking all different.
Breathing that in and having that all over you would be really nice.
Yeah,
that's a great one. An inhaler. Yes, I haven't seen them yet. But
I'd also really like to see some sort of like Delta-8 suppositories or creams for endometriosis and other parts down there. I mean, so that in particular for women with pelvic pain, my physical therapist works with a lot of women who have that problem. And I really think that cannabis is going to be a lifesaver for so many women. I think that teenage girls that are like put on birth control pills because they have bad period cramps really need some cannabis to
totally.
You don't want to be in birth control pills for your whole life. If you start that young and then I don't know. I just feel like there should be other ways that women can get assistance with those, menstrual problems and other kind of endometriosis and other kinds of pelvic pain.
I agree. Yep. And Mark and I've talked about that. We've done, shows on, sexual health and intimacy and, using cannabis and the multiple ways of doing it. And yeah,
Yes.
it's definitely, and it's great. And there's a couple of nurses that we work with too, that do use the cannabis suppositories, and they do rub it on their belly and their lower back and even in their belly button. And they've had really good results, with
belly button thing is fascinating to me. I don't have pelvic pain, so I've experimented, but I hadn't really noticed anything. But I really am very curious about that. I find that to be so interesting that it is a sort of hyperconduit of some sort too.
Yeah, absolutely. All the nerves that are in there.
Yeah. And Gail's asking about transdermal patches.
Ooh, yeah.
Questions recently about that. Yeah. I mean, there's good transdermal patches on the marketplace today. They really are.
That slow, steady release of cannabinoids through your body, right? Just how cool is that?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like microdosing.
Yeah.
Microdosing in any way, shape, or form, I feel like is going to be very popular going forward. I mean, especially, in some states, they're even starting to have legalized, mushrooms. And people I've talked to have used that in microdoses. It sounds like a very lovely tool for people with mental health issues, which I have 2 kids. My daughter had anorexia, and I also had a niece. It's a genetic thing. Along with our Ehlers-Danlos, we get anorexia in our family. Yay!
You never, you get what you get. You have no control over it. It's like, oh,
I know.
Okay.
But that is a set. Eating disorders are a set of mental health ailments that are greatly aided by cannabis. Believe it or not, I know a lot of parents are very scared of it because there's also schizophrenia and other comorbidities sometimes with anorexia, and so obviously cannabis is sometimes suspect in that realm. But I do think that it's very helpful for people who have anxiety. And most eating disorders are intimately tied to anxiety, if not actually anxiety disorders. So that's something I'd really like to see some more research on how people with any kind of eating and feeding problem could get access to knowledgeable professionals who could help them with possibly onboarding cannabis as a solution, because anti-anxiety meds are pretty hardcore. They're the ones that the pharmaceutical they're helpful. I'm grateful for them. They saved my kids' lives, but there's lots of side effects, and if you don't get it right, it's pretty tough. So
I
was a lot of research being done these days. So we're early on in this thing, right? So how exciting is it to be on the forefront of this? I love the fact that I left my last life and moved into this completely new space. Like similar to you, Karen, I didn't lose my job. I sold my company, but exited this other life and then started this new one.
Yeah.
So amazing.
And then it's interesting too, is that the cannabis plant must have had a plan for me, because, I was forced out of traditional nursing due to an illness, a chronic debilitating illness. And every single time I tried to go back to work, there would be another condition that would pop up. Just one thing after another, one pill after another. And finally I was like, I surrender. And then cannabis came into my life. And then I was like, this is something I can do. If I can figure out how to make this plant work for me, you can call me the green nurse.
I was going to say, can I ask the two of you a question? Do you mind? I know it's
no, not at all.
But so how as nurses, because I am not a nurse in practice, so I collaborate with nurses in making curriculum, but do you find how many states is it, or how is it broken down legally that you can or cannot use cannabis as a medical professional? Like, I know that in some states it's possible, some states it's not, some states you can get a card. I mean, in general, do you find that the nurses that you engage with are struggling to try and be able to use it themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's really more tied to, in a state, you can get a medical card, not a problem with your license, you can have it. but it's, again,
The
what you
employer.
experienced, it's
Right.
facility based. It's going to be
Mhm.
based on your employer
That's
as to
what I thought.
whether they have a problem with it or not. So
Yep.
a great deal of them
Mhm.
are underground. They never
Yep.
mention it in their workplace. They're not out on social media.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, luckily I don't have to have that nursing job, right? So I'm free to speak my mind, which is
Exactly.
something I do quite often. So
Me too.
Sherry, you know,
Yeah.
is in the space because she couldn't go back to that other world, and
I
now is
recreated myself.
by it.
Yeah.
You saved yourself. You saved your life.
Absolutely. And but it really, I will tell you, my friends that are nurses that are still working, you know, shifts on the floor,
Mhm.
and they get a back injury. I have a friend who's a labor and delivery nurse, and she's getting ready to start that master's program at Maryland.
Yay! I'm one class left. I have research.
Oh,
So I get
really?
to do
That's
research
great.
design, and I'm done.
Oh,
Woo!
congratulations. That's so exciting. I would love
So
to hear
excited.
more about that.
Oh,
But
happy
yeah,
to
she's
share.
ready to do that because she's a labor and delivery nurse, and she said, my body's falling apart. I hold, you know, big legs up in the air for, you
My
know,
daughter had to leave L&D. She had to leave labor and delivery. She's a nurse, and she's, 36, and she hurt her back. She can't physically do that job anymore.
and if
And
they let you be
daughter-
stoned when you were doing it, I'm sorry, you'd probably be just fine, but they won't let you. You know, I mean,
Right.
if she could have had cannabis in her system, and she'd probably be able to handle a lot more of that.
muscles
And
would have been relaxed. Yeah, so many
Exactly.
different things.
And
So
she's
many
like,
different things.
so they're going to lose me as an L&D nurse because, you
Mhm.
know, I'm going to go find something to do in cannabis where I'm not going to be told I can't use this.
Right.
And that's what I was
Exactly.
thinking when I said hospital systems really, I mean, if they would just change their policies.
It's you know what? It's all hinging on all of those pieces of the federal legality and the insurance. Eventually, insurance is going to pay for this because they can't ignore the fact that it's going to save them money.
I was
Yeah.
just
Be
saying,
the driving factor. It's not going to be that it helps more people. It's going to be that they save money. They don't have to
Yeah.
spend for pharmaceuticals. They'll absolutely be paying for it.
Absolutely.
I'm
So
so happy to hear you say that. I've
Mhm.
I
had
agree.
wars with insurance companies throughout my
Yeah.
life. Well,
Right.
anytime you have somebody with mental illness, insurance companies do not like to pay for that.
Absolutely
So,
not. No.
No.
Yeah, so many wars with them that if they could come around on that, I would maybe soften a little.
They will.
Because
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
great to hear. I'm going to stay as
Mhm.
optimistic as you because
I know that's why we're doing what we're doing here.
That's
It's
why
all
we were.
in that direction, and it's always about money, money, money.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and they will. The evidence is there when
Mhm.
it's finally accepted in the majority of places. They will absolutely look at it and understand that they're going to save money in their bottom line.
Yes.
And
I
the side
hope so.
effect of that is it's going to save a whole bunch of people and give them a healthy, happy life.
Which is
And that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? Mark and I are building the green nurse. So
Yeah.
someday we will be able to take insurance because we do see that. So we envision a future where patients will have access to this medicine, access to the education, access to everything that they need, progressive tools to support and nourish the most important system in their body. So
Yeah.
how do you envision the future of cannabis industry?
Oh, if I had if I could just make it what I want, I could envision it being this beautiful, you know, how should I say, locally on many, many levels, locally produced
Mhm.
plant-based medicine with organic growing practices and solventless processing. And I would love to see the seed to sale system actually integrated in with some sort of whole database that kept track of all of the different chemivars and where they're available and what kind of is showing up in them in terms of their profiles of terpenes and cannabinoids.
Mhm.
And then that kind of information would be available to patients in the dispensary or the provisioning center where they went to purchase their medicine, so that they could peruse the sort of menu of all of the different chemivars with things very clearly mapped out as to what's there, and then have consultation with nurses who are available to help them pair and tailor what they're choosing from all of the different chemivars with the other things that they have going on in terms of their other medical needs. And even for adult use patients, so that, if you just want to relax on a Friday night, but you also take this other blood pressure medication, you know that what you're getting isn't going to make you have a night of like, oh, I feel like my heart's busting.
Yes.
Yes.
What's going on? And it's all because of the different, the profile of the chemovar you got. So anyway,
Right.
I would love to see that happen. That's my fantasy envisioning of the future, but I feel like it's fun to think about what's possible, because so much of our lives is full of things that are limiting us. And so I feel like this is an industry that we have this moment to fantasize and imagine what could be, and it could possibly happen. So
it's going to happen.
Your thoughts create your reality.
Yes.
So we're thinking.
We talked about that on our morning show. Your thoughts create your reality.
Good. Yeah.
So
this has been so wonderful. Yeah, this has been so wonderful. Do you have another question, Mark? Because I was
just going to ask, how do we find Leaf Medic to take a course?
Here we go.
You
read my mind.
So you can visit our website which is mmjtraining.com. And my email is karen@mmjtraining.com as well. So if you want to reach out to me by email, or if you want to go click around our website and learn some more about us, please do. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. There's also a phone number on our website if you want to call me. I'm pretty much the one who mans a lot of that stuff. So please reach out. I'd be interested in talking to anybody who is interested in either learning more about cannabis, or is interested in maybe getting connected up with having the dispensary in their community have their bud tenders train. That's what I'm going for, trying to improve that situation. So thanks. I really am grateful for you having me on here, and also Kathleen the other day. And so thanks so much.
Oh my God.
That you took the time to be with us tonight.
Yes, we could share the love. Sharing is caring.
Thank you.
Right.
And so we bow to the light in you. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for showing up in the space and for making a difference in people's lives. And remember, everyone, what it's all about. It's about living your best life and helping others do the same.
That's right. Thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. We'll see you daily at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're on here, but every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Thanks for joining us tonight.